fellow Stranglers fans. The following video you're about to see is, in my humble opinion, the definitive and the only video where you can see the differences between a Blackmail original Stranglers sleeve, Peaches of course, and a counterfeit. The video was done by Karl Kay, and he's graciously given me permission to reproduce it for all to see, to reach a broader audience. To give you some sort of perspective, Karl put this up on Facebook almost 5 years ago now. The quality varies, sign of the times I guess in video quality, but I think it's an important document. Karl knows his stuff. He's a retired graphics designer and worked in the paper industry in lithography. He knows his stuff. This video is long. Karl put it up in 4 parts, and 4 separate parts, and I've edited it into one huge part. I couldn't grab the video from Facebook and save it at all, such as Facebook. Karl no longer has access to the original files, so I had to get my iPad out and screen record every single bit of video that I could see and then edit it meticulously. So I really do hope you enjoy this. This is a fantastic video. Apologies for the quality in some parts. It is what it is, but it's too important if you're a Stranglers fan to disregard it, and it actually, by watching this video, may save you hundreds if not thousands of pounds if you're tempted to buy a Peaches Blackmail and 7-inch, and it will tell you the difference between a counterfeit one and an original version. So enjoy.
Good afternoon, fellow Stranglers collectors, of which I am not a collector, but I have a lifetime interest in the band since 1978. Most of you know me. My name is Karl Kay. I have a very small Stranglers memorabilia collection, in so much that I just bought the regular stuff. So I don't have anything very special to offer, but one thing that I do have to offer is my working career was spent wholly within print and design. I left school in 1979 and became a machine printer, running letterpress Heidelberg kit, then progressing on to litho equipment later on. I qualified in 1983 after a 4-year apprenticeship as a printer, and then I spent the rest of my career in print management, running print companies and the like, liaising with people such as Heidelberg, Ricoh, Xerox, EFI, Fiery, right into the transition of digital print in the 90s. Anyway, so that's basically a little bit about my background and who I am and what I'm about. And what we're going to do today is hopefully put to bed the controversy regarding the original 1977 withdrawn Blackmail sleeve, as it's known of, for Peaches, and the subsequent reprints, whether they be digital, whether they be litho, and the reasons why I feel that some are fake and are very good fake, and how you can tell which one's real. So I'm going to break this down into several little sections for you. So at some point during this, you can press pause, revisit anything, you can jot some questions down. I suppose the overriding thing I'd like to say here is, if you're not confident in analysing your own copy as to whether or not it's legitimate, I am available anytime. You can get in touch with me, and we can go through that process. One thing I would suggest that you do is, regardless of whether you're a serious collector or not, and the print element, the vinyl's another story, and I can't really speak about that as to various types of pressings, etc. But if you're concerned about the print quality of anything, and anything I'm about to say within this video that we're going to break down, is get yourself one of these, which is called linen tester. It's not a loop, as people sometimes refer to it, or a jeweler's loop. It is a linen tester that is specifically used to analyse dot structure within printing. Because quality printing, such as photogravure and offset lithography, was a relatively new thing, printers stole the idea of the linen tester, and the name implies it was something that was used in the weaving industry to look at the weave of things such as linen. High quality linen and cotton obviously has more stitches per inch, and they would have used one of these over the years, and printers said, oh, that's a wonderful device, we'll have one of these, to have a look at how printing is registering and the dot structure and how the physical print appears on the sheet. So these are very useful. You probably pick one up for about £10, not a magnifying glass, linen tester. Get yourself one of those, very useful going forward. So that's part one over as to who I am, what I'm about, and obviously a support of the band. So hopefully that will give some validity with what I'm about to say, put your mind at rest that I do actually know what I'm talking about. I do have a piece of paper and I can put on the wall that says, I am a printer. Hello. Right, so here we are, part two, which is getting down to the technicalities of why you can spot something real versus something fake. Now, I'll get something out of the way now which is not really print connected, but it's down to the paper and just down to age. And that is what I would call the vinyl pressure point. So anybody who's owned records over the year, vinyl, the sleeves tend to sit in your record box. This isn't Peaches, by the way, it's Heroes, copy of mine. And when you put it in the sleeve, when you finish playing it, you drop it and it invariably starts to wear away at the bottom of the sleeve. So this is kind of obvious stuff that we all know. And even if you don't play them and you put them in your collection, they sit there, and just that the fact that is actually pushing down, sheer gravity will create a situation where you will get a pressure point here and a very slight parabolic effect on the sleeve. But that's just trivial stuff. That's not really printing. That's just basic physics, really. Having a look at this sleeve here, this is the suspect sleeve and the modern version. Okay, the record's dropped in there. I don't know. It stands proud slightly at the top here, which you would never see. And there is absolutely no pressure point going on here whatsoever. It's a very sharp crease. It's had no wear and tear. There's just no patina about this at all. It looks like it was printed yesterday or last week or last year. So that's a basic one which you could probably spot. You could argue that if somebody had taken one of these out of the factory on day one, didn't put some vinyl in it and put it on a shelf, it would be in great condition. However, we will come on to paper type and degradation, etc. In a moment in part three. Thank you. Now, here we go, part three. Now we're getting into something which, again, isn't printing technically, it is the paper. However, because of my background, because how we were taught about printing, we were taught principles of printing, which went into things such as how paper behaves when it goes through a printing press. For example, the manufacturing of paper, grain direction, which was important on a litho press, because litho printing is based on the principle that oil and water don't mix, but there is a certain amount of water in the process. And the grain direction was essential to ensure that when you put the sheets back through the machine, that they didn't stretch or contract too much. So grain direction is massively important. The way paper was manufactured was important, and you had to know that. You had to understand that when you bought larger sheet sizes and you were cutting them in half, that if the grain direction was incorrect, you would struggle to print it. Certainly within litho printing, not so critical with traditional letterpress printing, but by the time we were becoming more heavily reliant on litho in the 70s and 80s, the type of paper we used and the way paper was manufactured was hugely important. So, the paper type, thankfully, the controversy regarding these sleeves, it was printing on an uncoated stock, which was hugely unusual for the day. As everybody knows who's bought singles from the 70s, and I've got something better change here, Heroes, an old lurker sleeve which I pulled apart for a reason which I'll touch on. They're all printed on what we call coated paper. I won't go on as to why they're printed on coated paper. There was a technical reason. It's nothing to do with making them look nice or expensive. It just means they're more stable going through the press. The concept, as I say, about oil and water not mixing. If you use a coated stock, which is calendared and coated and polished, you can put it through the press many times and it won't expand and contract. What we have here with the Peaches sleeve on the day, and I'm presuming this was part of the reason to make it look a bit punk, was to use an uncoated paper, which was very unusual for a colour print and something of the day to use this type of stock. I'm presuming somebody in the design team or the marketing thing thought it'd be a great idea to use just something that felt like bog standard paper. Now, that makes that significantly easy for me to therefore tell at a glance as to whether or not something is of 1977 or something that's post at least 95, maybe onwards. One of the basic things is what we call, and I'm talking about you won't be able to hear this on the video, but just by doing this, the fact that it doesn't rattle and the grain length and there's a certain amount of cotton fibre in this tells me that this is something that was manufactured, the paper was manufactured 70s when paper manufacturing was done because that was the only method of communication in the day. We thought we would have to keep things like this and magazines and books for hundreds of years. Digital, the concept of storing things digitally wasn't something that was in people's minds. Therefore, paper had to be manufactured in a way that it didn't degrade. You see posters and things from 200, 300, 400 years ago and they have foxing. When you consider they've been exposed to the elements for 200 or 300 years and they're only starting to have acid attacking them, just goes to show about the way paper was made was significantly differently. A piece of paper from, that's a piece of modern A4 80 gram, really short grain. It's like a timpani drum. This will fall apart in 10 years time. You can stick it on a shelf and go to it. It may or may not, depends on where it was made. And I'm sorry to say that the night of this Snyder copy, should we start calling it Snyder now? Very much it's like there's no rag content in this. It's 100 gram, maybe 105 gram, slightly calendared, really short grain. Doesn't even smell right, to be absolutely honest. Whereas, sorry to be throwing your. Whereas this, it's a piece of very old paper. You can see by inside here, it started to fox slightly where the pressure point from the label. What's happened here is the label has been applied with glue, and because we have two different types of paper, we have ink and we have ink transfer, and it started to etch the surface of the sheet. That's just something that will happen over time. Yeah, paper type, rad content, good for us in doing a bit of detective work, that it's printed on some paper that really gives the game away quite easily. We're going to go on to the cutting and creasing in a moment in part 4. So that's covered off the paper, and I hope you understand that, or at least get that. Thank you. Now, here we are, part 4. This is going to be a little bit complex, but I need to do it and I need to explain. It's just one of the other identifiers. It's not massively important, but it is a nice box to tick. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we call cutting and creasing and die cutting. They are same kind of processes. These days, cutting and creasing is done automatically on a machine where you program it and it cuts and creases things for you, and it plots and cuts automatically. However, back in the 70s, 80s, and to a certain extent even the 90s, cutting and creasing to shape, and what you have here, and I've taken apart the the magical lurkers ain't got a clue sleeve. I've not done this and destroyed it for today. My copy has been like this more or less since I've had it. It fell apart in 1978, and that's been really useful because what I'm able to do, this is also, I can tell by the size of the form that's been used, they call it a cutting form, that it is a Delga product. There's nothing on it that says Delga, but what they've done here with blind masking the rear to give this solid effect is something they've done, and I've noticed on other sleeves they haven't printed to the edge because they didn't need to, because when it's glued together you would never notice. But this is a nice little piece that I'll touch on in a while. But this is what we call die cutting, and there's a piece of die cutting, really complex, that I did on a print job from around about 1983. Took a day to make this form ready for the die cutting. It's very complex. This is all a manual operation. You have the die made for you by somebody who specialises in woodwork and metalwork, and then you set the die to either cut or crease in one operation. So a full sheet would go into a press like so, and when it came out, this would be on one sheet of paper, and you'd be able to just pull apart the bits you didn't need. You left them on a full sheet and you pass that through to the bindery. One thing you are able to do and look on your peach's sleeve is look for the little areas where the 2 points of a die meet but don't meet fully. You would get a little bit of a tuft of residual paper, or a bit of swarf as you'd call it in engineering. There are identical tufts and paper fibres on this original 77 sleeve in the top corners. That is also noticeable on other die cuts I've seen of singles of the day. It's visible on the Something Better Change sleeve as well, where the unrequired part of the print is thrown away, and when they tear it, it just tears the paper very slightly because it's not a precise cut. So that's one giveaway that you will see through your eyeglass if you've purchased one. Also, I suppose I ought to touch on this now, another one which is a bit of a dead giveaway, but you know, we could argue this semantics if it was reprinted, is the size of the sleeve. Because the cutting form to create this has to be the same size every time. If they reorder the singles or they release another single, you're not going to spend hundreds of pounds in the 70s remaking a cutting form to make a sleeve slightly smaller. And this is another dead giveaway. And here we have the real McCoy, using millimetres because it's wholly accurate rather than inches, and that's 180 millimetres or 18 centimetres side to side, and 183, nearly 184 or 18.4 centimetres top to bottom. The Snidey copy is bang on 180 wide, not a problem. Top to bottom 180. It falls short by 3.5 millimetres. There's no way anybody's used the same cutting form to cut this and that. The cutting form I've looked at that's been used for this, it's almost certainly been used for the Something Better Change sleeve and a couple of other singles I have. You don't make cutting forms for sleeves for different bands unless they specifically requested the opening at the side, but again there would be a standard form for that. And finally, and probably, and again this is slightly technical but I do need to touch on this, is these days the technology exists to be able to make this and you don't have to crease the edges. So these edges here are merely they're called machine folded. They will go into a machine and they will fold them. Simple as that. Wasn't as simple as that in the 70s. What we had to do, as is demonstrated here and here, is any part of the sleeve that needs to fold has to be creased, and it's called channel creasing. And when you look under your eyeglass at the reverse side of any channel crease, and you can tell which is the reverse side because it either has a channel or a peak. So the peak is going to be on the inside. So if you look on the inside under your eyeglass, you will see that the paper is slightly indented and raised. That is visible on the 1977 sleeve. It's been channel creased and it has the peak. It hasn't been folded. They've used this method to produce this. I can't pull apart this snidey copy because it's not mine. So what I've had to do is look inside, and I can tell that it's just been creased. It's been folded. It hasn't been creased in any way. It's certainly been cut, but this will have been merely cut and then folded, and maybe by hand. I'm not entirely sure. It's a great copy, without a doubt. From a technical point of view, if somebody gave me unlimited resources and time, I'm sure I could come up with something very similar, albeit the fact that it's not colour matched in any way. That's also another obvious dead giveaway. Why is this bright orange when this is yellow? And I'll come on to the technical aspects of dot structure in the next part. Right, here we go. Part 5. Let's get to the controversial part here. I don't want to finish on the controversy. I'll just finish with some conclusions. So this is part 5, and this is regarding the magic lines that appear on the back of the sleeve. Does it have to have lines for it to be a true copy of the day, or are lines an indication that it's fake? Now, I would like to throw in here very early that there's some mystery around the amount of copies of these that exist. And in 1978, when I became a Stranglers fan in the April, it was the June time when a lad who was in my technical drawing class called Andy, I mentioned that I'd got a copy of Peaches. Now, obviously, I was reverse engineering my collection because Peaches had obviously come out the year before, and I brought my copy of Peaches into school, and the first thing he said was, "That's not the right sleeve." And I said, "Well, it is, because I've just had it delivered yesterday." And he said, "No, it isn't. That's some sort of ridiculous replacement sleeve. It's not. They've obviously done it as a reprint, and it's not right." And because I lived in the provinces, and I thought, well, I can't, what have I got to back up? I knew that this was the sleeve, the one with the peach. However, this lad was insistent that the one I had was incorrect. And what he did was, the next day, he came in with his brother's copy like that. And that's the first time I'd seen the sleeve in that style. And I just couldn't understand, I couldn't get my head around it. But when I said I had nothing to refer to, I didn't know anything about the fact that this Blackmail sleeve had been withdrawn. But that was summer of 78, and I saw a copy of it. Then there was a lad who was resitting his chemistry O-level. He used to sit opposite me. He had a copy, and he showed me it in 1979. And the same in late 78, there was a lad who was a sort of a local famous punk. When we say famous, because he was a year older and he was into punk, he was famous, and that was it, called Ernie Brown, who was a big 999 fan. However, he had a copy too. Now, I lived in Cleethorpes, for God's sake, which is the arse end of nowhere, and without even trying, I'd seen 3 copies of the Blackmail sleeve by 1979. So the number of there's 30 out there in the whole of the UK, I just don't buy it. I just cannot see how that's the case. There would have been people who bought the single because they liked it, who have no idea what they've bought, and it's sitting in a loft, and they're not a fan. They just like the record. So there'll be plenty out there in that sense. But I don't want to get into that one. I don't want to devalue what you have and from the collectors. But I just don't see there being such a small quantity. Therefore, with that in mind, I'd like to touch on the lines. Now, very quickly, I would like to say that I think the lines appear on the snide copies because they've picked up an original copy with the lines and used that to copy. So they've scanned it with the lines and the lines have appeared. They wouldn't know whether or not to remove the lines or not. It is a straightforward printing error where the duct keys have either been a bit too tight and starved some of the ink supply, but the lines are too fine for that, and I really do believe that it's probably just a little bit of contamination on one of the rollers that maybe affected 200, 300, 400 copies before the printer saw it, would have stopped the press, washed the blanket and plates down and restarted the press. I'm pretty confident that they probably would have printed 10,000, maybe 20,000 sleeves originally, sent them through to the bindery for die cutting and making up. Some will have had the lines, some won't have had the lines. Sure, they withdrew them, and maybe 8,000, 9,000 of them never even left the factory, probably just destroyed. But to explain how there may be some with lines and some without lines is very simple and straightforward. You don't just print, if somebody orders 10,000 of these, you don't just get 10,000 sheets of paper that's a bit bigger, print them and cut them out. What you do, and would have done in 77, is printed them to view on a sheet of paper, at least this side. It would have been printed either on SRA2, which is this, or what we call crown size, which is around about 1.5 inches shorter than that and 3/4 of it. I can't quite remember in millimetres, but you can Google what crown size is. Would have been printed crown size 2-up on something like a Cord 64 or maybe a 2-colour press in the day with 2 passes. When you print something 2-up, something that's printed correctly on this side of the sheet may not be the same standard of print as you have on this side of the sheet. And I've got something here now, and that shows you how it would have been printed and presented to the pressman who ran the cutting and creasing machine. They would have guillotined this in half, set up the cutting and creasing to cut these out, and then made minor adjustments, because you can't get the guillotine exactly right, to die cut this side. So you'd have run 5,000 of these, say, cut them in half, gives you 10,000 sleeves, and then you die cut them. Fine, we're happy with that. Here's a letterhead that I printed in sometime in the early 80s. Just a basic single colour letterhead. It's a nice dull rattle there because high rag content in the paper. And even though this is a single colour, we haven't used step and repeat. We've used 2 negatives to make this, as they would have done for this. I've highlighted here, this one's printed nice and neat and tidy, and over here we have a couple of little dots that have appeared there, which will have been on the negative. The graphic artist hasn't used the paint to stop the negative exposing the plate. I've not seen that because I've obviously assumed it's part of the clouds. So if we printed 5,000 of these, then I've got 5,000 okay and 5,000 with these couple of little dots. Now, that's a minor imperfection on a basic letterhead job. When it comes to printing something, possibly 2 passes on a 4-colour press, so it's going through the press twice, unlikely to have been printed on a full colour press in its day, you are going to get maybe one side here with this very slight issue with either the dampers or the rollers creating the line, as you can see here. And that is also being picked up in the scanned version here. And there will almost certainly be copies from 1977 which sat on the other side of the sheet from 2-up that will not have the lines. They will pass all of the other tests. They will have the right rattle. They will have the back here where it isn't printed to the edge, because Delga obviously had some method whereby that fit into their template. It will have all of those, but it won't have the line. So either they were from the same side of the sheet and the printer spotted it, cleaned off the press, cleaned the rollers, and then started the machine again, and you just had two batches, one with, one without. Or my theory would be you have a set that was printed on one side, a set that was printed on the other. I don't want to get into too much detail here, but I have noticed the other day that on the reverse of the genuine article, there is a small missing area of the negative here, just next to Dave's head, where it hasn't printed properly, and there's actually some of the cyan that hasn't printed properly, so it appears to be a gap. And it's just a small gap in the negative. That isn't on the snide copy. It's perfectly. Now, that means that that happened on press. That's an error that happened on press. Probably just a little bit of lint that's got onto the blanket. It hasn't made the full impression. When they've scanned the copy, they've obviously cloned, using something like Photoshop, cloned the errors out to give a perfect print. Also, within the original version, this is what you can do with your eyeglass, is if you look under the eyeglass at where the letters meet, so the yellow meets the green, if you look closely, there is a very, very faint white gap. And that is because the artwork was created manually, and when it's printed, it is a mechanical, physical process. When they've scanned it, the white gap hasn't been picked up as fully white, and there's actually printing where there should be the gap. Because this is a blanket overall process, it just sees it as a photograph. So when you look at it, the white gaps don't appear, because you cannot replicate an error that has happened due to it being a manual process of the day. Part of the problem is you have to accept that it's so precise and specific, the print type, that that it's going to pick it up, warts and all, as it appeared on the day. And I'll come on to a couple of dead giveaways in a moment, but hopefully that covers off the issues regarding the lines, how it would have been printed on. I've got crown size here, 412 by 533 millimeters, so it fits nicely. You know, I've already checked. I know what we would have done. We were definitely, no way we would run this one up, as we'd call it, for a 10,000 run in the day. We'd have done it 2 up, 5,000, preferably. You know, that is just exactly how we've done it. Absolutely no way would have done it any other way. It just isn't cost effective to do it in any other way. And also, the lines follow the press, and I've put some arrows here. If they were running it 1 up to waste, as we called it, they would have printed this that way round, and the lines would have had to go that way. That is the direction of the sheet through the press. It's absolutely been printed this way with the rollers running that way, and the lines have appeared here. If it was printed 1 up, so therefore dispelling any theory around whether the lines are real or fake, one, the lines can't appear sideways, because that is definitely a press rolling issue, nor would you have run it 1 up. You would have definitely run it 2 up, and that would have been the sheet direction of travel and the rollers running that way. So it's absolutely done 2 up, as I described. I'll come on to, in the final part, what I would call the coup de grace, just to use a bit of a Stranglers reference for you there, as to why this is absolutely, you probably want to skip all of those processes and then use them at the end, and maybe look at these 1 or 2 things that I can say that you can spot for definite to indicate which avenue of inquiry we want to go down after that. So these are the simple, anybody can spot, absolute dead giveaways, and then you can use the other elements to then further inspect. If you've got any, you think, well, I'm not entirely sure there, you can use any of those other processes to then either say, happy days, it's real, or no, it's not right. So see you in part 6. Well, I was checking there. Welcome to part 6. You will need your linen tester. And this isn't too technical because I've just given you 4 years of principles of printing lessons in 30 minutes, so you're now all experts. So you have a linen tester, and you're now relatively familiar with some of the mechanical methods of printing, how something was physically made, how it was die cut, how the paper behaves, how not rattly paper is of the day. You're probably in a position now you're thinking, right, how can I tell at a glance whether or not I have a genuine copy or the much maligned snidey, as we like to call it. So, firstly, let's get the technical bit out of the way. Dots per inch, screen, etc. Everybody who's got a home printer talks about, oh, it's 300 dpi, oh, it's 600 dpi, oh, it's this. DPI, dots per inch, that's what it means. It's interpolated, so the dots per inch mean amount of dots on your X and amount of dots on the Y. You multiply it, and however many dots you can fit in a square inch is your dots per inch. Stands to reason, the more dots within your inch, the finer the print. So, 1977, 300 dpi, wow, awesome, awesome. Can't believe it, high quality. I remember when we got to something like 600 dots per inch in the 80s with certain methods of plastic plate making, astounded that we could get that kind of level. We're now, I've been retired a couple of years, I don't want to embarrass myself, but I'm pretty sure that digital plate making, and let's be honest, they don't make plates anymore. They're done automatically, but should plates be made in a traditional sense, we were making plates at 3600 dpi. Now, one of the things that's changed over the years as well is back in the 70s and the 80s to a certain extent, the screen, what we call the taking a photo and breaking it up into dots, and you've probably all seen newspapers from the 70s that were just printed letterpress, black and white, and the dots were huge. And the dark areas had big dots and the light areas had very small dots. And that's all it was. It's called halftone. So go away and Google halftone and printing and it will bring it up. Now in the 70s, when we were printing in 4 colour, cyan, magenta, yellow and black, we would print just those 4 colours to create every colour. So that's all it is. Full colour printing is the addition of cyan, magenta, yellow and black. And if you get one of these and you get a magazine that drops through your door and you drop it on there, you'll see all those little dots all made up. If it's digitally printed on your home printer, the dots may be little flecks and lines. It's not actually dots unless it's a laser printer, and even a laser printer to a certain extent, the dot structure is so small you might not actually see the dots themselves. The technology has got to that sort of stage. Printing can't help itself in a traditional sense, that it's limited to the fact that you are putting a plate on a machine, adding ink and water to it, transferring it to a blanket, which is just like a really high quality piece of rubber, and then the blanket touches the paper. So it's called non-impact in printing in the sense that offset lithography. Litho is the printing method, offset means the plate never touches the paper, it gets transferred by the blanket. Now, back in the 70s we had all sorts of problems with what we called dot gain, so if the blanket was too tight or hit the paper too hard, the dots started small and by the end of the sheet they'd sort of stretched a little bit, those kind of things. So the technology of the day and the quality of and the size of the dots was pretty rough and ready. And what we called the screen we used was linear. So if you look at a piece of printing, guaranteed printing of the day, put your linen tester over the top, and I can't do it here because we can't do the close-up, but I we'll try and tag some photos on at the end or some links, is that the dots are either very small or they become very big, but that's it. And you'll see little flecks of magenta or little flecks of blue or lots of yellow where it looks like a solid yellow. Certainly here, this yellow looks like it's been printed solid yellow. It's because the dots are so close together that it's printed pure yellow. I think there's a little tiny bit of magenta, the odd, I mean literally like every 4 millimeters there's one dot of magenta. That's how little red is in there. Now, 1970s printing, you cannot replicate that. You can't scan it on that level and then make it look like, because you are photographing something that's already been printed. So when you photograph it or scan it, in this case, your equipment you use to scan it will then interpret that in its own way. It will say, this is what it looks like, and you'll put it on screen and it will look exactly the same, absolutely fine. But then when you come to print it using litho, you are down to the technology of your day. And this is where it gets tripped up, because this is very obviously printed in the 70s. The dot structure is rough. The print quality up close is rough. To the naked eye, it's beautiful, it's work of art. Under the eyeglass, it's very of its day. Dot structure, as I say, is very coarse. However, somebody has taken this, used a very, very good scanner, scanned the sleeve to generate this before it was printed. The downside to that is you're just scanning that as if it was a photograph, so it will then interpret it. I won't go into colour correction, but you can Google colour correction if you wish. They've not colour corrected this, so when you look at the snide copy under your eyeglass, you will see the yellow has been almost entirely covered. Well, certainly hundreds of dots per inch of magenta over the top of yellow, creating orange, which you can probably see here. It's even stronger on the reverse, which I'm guessing, yes, on the reverse of the original, it's quite. So whether or not they've colour corrected to make both sides appear the same, whereas on the original you have almost pure yellow with hardly any magenta on the reverse, a little tiny bit of magenta to give it this slightly orange effect. This one, they've colour corrected it to look the same, so it's clearly scanned. We've already established that it's too short. It can't help itself when it comes to dot structure. Now again, what I've got here, this serves two purposes. This is a close-up using the linen tester to show two things. Initially, as you can see here, the dot structure is almost hexagonal, and this will appear different when you see it on your own, through your own linen tester. You've got a series of cyan, magenta and yellow and black dots, which are, that is a typical modern digital print screen. The dots are not linear, as I mentioned before. They're not just dot, 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 dot in a line. They are on top of each other, hexagonally in shape almost, creating this screen. Now that's been done to improve the print quality, and it was a significant leap in technology when that method of screening, Danapon Screen in Japan, were one of the best scanners, and Hell Scanners and Heidelberg were in business with them, created scanners that were able to scan things to the highest quality. Problem is, it's too high a quality, and it's a dead giveaway if you're, it's like saying I'll rebuild a steam engine, but it'll be so precisely manufactured, it's very obvious it wasn't put together with a hammer and chisel as a steam engine would have been. The gap in technology is so vast. So clearly this is modern print. We've already established it doesn't have the crease channels, it's got no wear here whatsoever. The paper was created last week. The print quality is too good, and as I say, the dot structure is modern, and probably the final giveaway for me. I did actually have to peel back a little bit here. What they've done is they've cloned the print, so when it is printed, it goes all the way to the edge, and as we've established, Delga never ever printed to the edge, because and I'm assuming here, this is one thing I will guess, but I'm pretty certain that because of the gluing process, they would want clean sheets. The more inks here, the less likely the glue is to stick. So they would want a clean gluing surface here. There's no clean gluing surface on this one at all. It prints all the way to the edge. It makes it easier for the printer because they don't have to worry about registration, or it gives them lots of space to play with the cutting process afterwards. This was created in an age when it was a real skill, and the fact that they haven't printed to the edge isn't a problem because they work to such fantastic tolerances. So it doesn't print to the edge. That's a giveaway. And probably the one that stands out the most is because they've scanned this here, and probably the best thing to show is this is where it's the giveaway. So this is the original, and somebody has scanned this and what they've done is, because they've scanned this edge here where it cuts, they've forgotten to remove the scan of the edge. So the hard edge has actually been printed below. They've made the plates and they've printed and as you can see on this scan here, this is the snide copy. This is where the sheet has cut. It's been cut. Sheet. And here is the scanned edge of the one that they've copied. So they've printed the shadow of the die cut crease, which is a dead giveaway that they've don't think of like your home scanner where they've put it under a little Epson thing. They will have used a really high quality scanner to create the plates, but they've made a bit of a schoolboy error that they've physically scanned without taking it apart. They've got an original sleeve and scanned it. They've not taken it apart to work out this, so they've cloned the edges to print to the edges, using probably something like Photoshop, enable them to do that. They've gone to the effort of having either a die manufactured to at least cut it, or used an automated cutting process. But yeah, unfortunately, so this one here with the scribble that looks a little bit sorry for itself is 1977 all day long. I don't know when this was produced. It wasn't produced in the 80s as a secondary run. It just isn't. I don't doubt, and I don't know any of the backstories, that if they could have found the original film negatives in the late 70s, early 80s, somebody could have run some more copies of this. But the dot structure would remain the same. If they've used the same artwork and made new negatives, the dot structure would be different because technology was starting to move on. So yeah, there might be a bit of middle ground with some that were printed in the early 80s using the original artwork, maybe. I think that's highly unlikely. If there were any secondary bites of the cherry here, they were done at the time for whatever reason, but I don't know what the story is, or that might be just a bit of an urban myth that's done the rounds, that, oh yeah, we know that somebody at Delga did this and that. I just don't see that. I don't see how a commercial printer of that magnitude would allow staff to do something like that, how somebody would have acquired the artwork, because they were going for like £25 a go, to my knowledge. I saw them advertised in the Record Mirror in 79, 80 for 25 quid, the Blackmail sleeve as it was called. That's not a great deal of money at the time to warrant the time and effort to physically print more copies. I would say that what's occurring here is there are way more copies of this out there than people realise. Yes, there are two types, line and no line, but using these methods and techniques I've shown you, you should be able to tell for yourself. Look for the scan, look for the no bleed, so you're going to have a bit of it, but if it's a snidey copy, who cares? And it's not the same size. Short of that, give it a shake or send it to me and buy me a pint. As Columbo used to say, just one more thing, and this was after I'd done the filming. I said I'm not a collector, which I'm not. This is my original copy of Heroes, which I bought without picture sleeve, by the way, back in the day, and I had to pay somebody 50p for this sleeve in June 1978. And he sort of teased me all day with it, and it transpires it was his brother's. Anyway, so I'm not a collector. However, as I was putting everything away, I think I might just get into this collecting thing here, because as you can see, it's Heroes, and oh, it's got the same label both sides, eh? So if Neil, you'd like to send me £1,000, it's all yours.